First of all, let me thank everybody for attending tonight. I hope you'll find the event we have tonight interesting and thought-provoking. I'm Mike Haynes, the Development Services Director for the City of Missoula, and now it's our team that will be leading this growth policy update effort that we're calling Our Missoula. Even as a planner, I can see that an update of the growth policy doesn't sound super sexy, but I can tell you right now this is a unique opportunity to combine with other folks in the community and to engage and share in a creative and collaborative process to envision the future of Missoula and to establish a roadmap to get there. So this is really a very important process for the city, and I hope you'll be a part of that. I would like to just introduce a few folks before I hand over to the mayor here. First of all, our key development services team, our project manager, LaVal Means, who's sitting right in the front here. And we also have folks who'll be doing a lot of work on this project: Casey Wilson, Jen Gress, Tom Zavitz, Anita McNamara, and Leslie Schwab. We also have a few other staff members here, too many to mention by name, but we appreciate you all being here. This is the group that's going to be leading the project. They're going to be managing this project for the next year or so. We do have a facilitation group that we brought on board to help us with one of the most pivotal parts of this process, and that's the public engagement. And they are going to help to do a number of things, including facilitating community meetings like this one, to do listening sessions, focus groups, and a steering committee that we'll be talking about a bit later. And we have here Bob Horn, Kate Macmahon, and Jenna Cooper, so I'd like to recognize them. And then finally, we appreciate having some folks from the City Council here. I hope I'm not missing anyone, but I've seen Jason Weiner, Caitlin Koppel, Annalise Hedall, and Ed Childers, so we appreciate you being here. So we've got a lot going on tonight. I think you're going to find this a great program. We do have our keynote speaker here, Ed McMahon, and he's going to talk about the secrets of successful communities. Bob Horn's going to give an introduction and an overview of the growth policy process that we're talking about. And there's lots, as you can see around the room, lots of opportunity for some interaction and for us to get some ideas from you, some preliminary ideas on your views of Missoula. So without further delay, I'm going to ask Mayor Engen to step up and just share a few words. Thank you.
Mike, I appreciate that. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I think I heard you say a few words, and that troubles me. I have about 45 minutes worth of material I'd like to, and some of it I just need to get some stuff off my chest, so I hope you'll bear with me. Just wanted to get everyone in a room so this could be really a little more meaningful for me. No, I very much appreciate the fact that you are all here of a lovely Missoula evening. They are precious and have been few of late, so thank you for taking the time to participate in what I believe actually is a remarkably meaningful exercise, and in fact it's not just an exercise. So I've been kicking around local government now in one way or another for about 13 years, and there was a time when I must confess that I was a planning skeptic. It occurred to me that we did a lot of wringing of hands and prognosticating, and in the end, by the time we had completed our planning process, that which we were planning for had already happened. That, however, was misplaced skepticism, and as I have learned over the course of these years, we have a phenomenal professional staff, and we also have a remarkable community that wants to engage at every level, and engaging at this level in really the fundamental building blocks of how our community grows is an amazing opportunity. You all are here because you have a stake in our place. And we are fortunate enough in 2014 in Missoula, Montana, to still be a place. There are lots of cities and towns around the nation that are no longer places. They are generic spots where folks live a little, work a lot, play sometimes, and dream about places like Missoula, Montana. We are fortunate because we have made the effort to continue to be a place through processes just like this. We're calling this our Missoula because it really is. Each of us has a vision for the place. Each of us has a chance to participate in making that vision become more collective, and that collective vision can translate into action. And I can tell you specifically a number of things that come to play. When I first came to work at the city of Missoula, we talked a lot about urban transit, and that conversation was largely about what we called in those days a skeleton of a system. And people asked me, why do we make investments in transit? And my answer was, well, someday when we're a city, capital C, with some quotes around it, we're going to need that system. So today we have a skeleton, right? We have a germ of a system, and we hope that it grows into something someday when we need it. Well, it turns out we likely needed it then, and we damn sure need it now. And because we planned for it then, because we anticipated need, because folks had vision and conviction, our system today, I think, is the envy of many communities of our size. And tomorrow it will only get better. And that is a function of folks stepping up, getting involved, saying what they want, demanding action, and getting things done. So this isn't a plan that will sit on a shelf. This is a plan that will guide the policymakers, the folks who are making decisions for you at the city of Missoula, because you elect them to. This will guide them for years to come. This is a document that will help us say yes or no. It's a document that will help us say maybe. It's a document that will help us say yes if. And it's a document that sometimes will help us say hell no. And that's how you make a place. Right? So you, ladies and gentlemen, are here to help make this place even better than it is. That is a heavy responsibility, but I happen to know each and every one of you lovely human beings in this crowd tonight is up to it. And I think some more folks will join you, some may fall away, but in the end, I think we'll have a great product that suggests a vision, a perspective, a dream, a hope, and fundamentally, a reality for our place for the next generation. That's not bad. That's worth coming out on a Wednesday night. So thank you very much. With that, everyone can go home, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mayor. So it's my distinct pleasure to move right on and introduce our keynote speaker tonight, Ed Macmahon. Ed Macmahon holds the Charles E. Fraser Chair on Sustainable Development at the Urban Land Institute in Washington, D.C.
Let me come back up, Mike.
Okay, so I'm introducing then Bob Horn, because apparently the agenda changed since the last time I saw it. Sorry about that.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Mike. We are indeed happy to see everyone here this evening. My name is Bob Horn. I'm a member of the consultant team that's here assisting the city of Missoula with this community involvement component of the our Missoula road policy process. And that is precisely why we're here tonight. Because a growth policy has no value to anyone if it doesn't reflect the values and vision of the community it serves. And that's where you folks all come in. How many of you participated in the 2005 growth policy? Okay, see a few hands. Okay, good, good. Does everyone understand what a growth policy is? Okay, are you familiar with the term comprehensive plan or general plan? Have you heard that term, comprehensive plan, from other states? Okay. Very simply, a growth policy is what we call a comprehensive plan or a general plan here in Montana. A growth policy, though, is a broad body of public policy. It addresses the needs and issues in every area of community building, such as housing, economic development and job creation, environmental quality, natural resources, transportation, public facilities and services. A growth policy is not a master plan. It's not a document that says there's going to be a motel on this corner and a gas station on this corner. Again, a broad body of public policy. So tonight, we're here to kick off, as far as I'm concerned, the most extensive community involvement program I've ever seen for a long-range planning project anywhere. And we'll talk a bit more about that process after Macmahon speaks to us in just a minute. But first, some housekeeping. I guess everyone has found the room, the Riverside room, okay, where the kids are being taken care of. Okay, I don't see any kids in the audience. Of course, we have refreshments in the back of the room, okay, courtesy of the city of Missoula, so please help yourself to that. If you haven't had time to check out the maps in the back of the room, please take a moment to do that before you leave this evening. We have a city zoning map, a city neighborhood council district map for you to look at, and a future land use map in the back of the room, and another map for you to place a sticky dot on where you live. And I believe that's around the corner as you came in. The purpose of that is so we can make sure that all of the different areas of the community, the geographic areas of the community, are being represented in this process. A little later this evening, we'll have some exercises for you to help us out with. We have a timeline, okay? On the wall to my right, which we've noted some significant events in Missoula's past. However, we would like you to add to those events from the past, if you so desire. Mainly, though, we want your help in identifying significant events from Missoula's future. Yeah, you heard me right. Okay. We want you to all look into the future and tell us what you see from Missoula down the road in the next 20 years or so. We also have an exercise for you to describe the Missoula community in no more than 3 words, and we'll collect the responses of this exercise throughout the community involvement process and kind of compare notes as to what folks say at various stages of the process. We have a sign-up table for anyone who would like to volunteer to take an active part in the community involvement program, and that could include attending one of our future events. It can include hosting an event, helping us organize a future event such as a neighborhood gathering, and we'll talk a bit more about that later as well. This is extremely important because I said earlier, we can't chart Missoula's future course without you, the citizens of the community. Finally, everyone please fill out an evaluation sheet so we know how we're doing this evening. The evaluation sheets are on the flip side of your agenda. And we'll be happy to pick those up from you this evening, or you can take it with you and mail it and drop off at City Hall. Okay, that was a fast 5 minutes. Now I'd like to turn it back over to Mike to introduce our keynote speaker. Thank you.
Okay, you can see how fired up I am to get this thing going tonight. So again, I am here to introduce our keynote speaker, Ed Macmahon. Ed Macmahon holds the Charles E. Fraser Chair on Sustainable Development at the Urban Land Institute in Washington, D.C., where he is nationally known as an inspiring and thought-provoking speaker and leading authority on economic development and land use policies and trends. As a senior fellow for Sustainable Development, Macmahon leads ULI's worldwide efforts to conduct research and educational activities related to environmentally sensitive development, policies, and practices. Before joining the Urban Land Institute in 2004, Macmahon spent 14 years as Vice President and Director of Land Use Planning for the Conservation Fund in Arlington, Virginia, where he helped to protect more than 5 million acres of land of historic or national significance. He is also the co-founder and former president of Scenic America, a national non-profit organization devoted to protecting America's scenic landscapes. Before that, he taught law and public policy at Georgetown University Law Center for 9 years and served in the US Army, both home and abroad before that. Macmahon is the author or co-author of 15 books and over 300 articles, and writes regularly for Urban Land Magazine, Planning Commissioners Journal, and other periodicals, which only a planner would find fascinating, but I like them all. During the past 25 years, Macmahon has drafted numerous land use plans and ordinances. He has organized successful efforts to acquire and protect urban parkland, wilderness areas, and other conservation properties. Macmahon has served on numerous advisory boards and commissions, including the National Trust for Historic Preservation, Maryland, the Governor's Institute for Community Design, the Doris Duke Charitable Foundation, and the Alton Family Foundation. Macmahon has a BS from Spring Hill College, an MA in Urban Studies from the University of Alabama, and a JD from Georgetown University Law School. He and his wife live in Tacoma Park, Maryland. So please join me in welcoming Ed Macmahon.
Thank you, Mike. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I wish he had kept that introduction much, much shorter. I really learned how perilous introductions could be the first time my wife showed up at one of my talks. And I was really interested in what she thought I had to say, so I went up to her afterwards and said, "Honey, what'd you think?" And she said, "Well, that was just fine, but I want to talk about the introduction. It was ridiculous." She said, "The only thing they didn't say about you is they didn't say you were a model husband, now did they?" And I said, no, but that's a great idea. Maybe I'll add that. And she says, "Go home and look it up in the dictionary. If you look up the definition of model, it's a small replica of the real thing." Anyway, I want to thank all of you for being here tonight. It's a privilege to be here in Missoula, Montana. It's my first trip to Missoula, not my first trip to Montana, but I had a great tour today, and it's obvious that this is a great community with great assets, great people, and a great future. We're going to talk about 4 things tonight. We're going to talk about some of the changes that are shaping and reshaping American communities today. We're going to lay out some of the choices for growth and development that can make a community a better place to live in, look at, work in, or visit, or a worse place to live in, look at, work in, or visit. We're going to talk about show you some examples of how the development paradigm is changing in America, and it is changing, and we'll show you some of those. And finally, we will conclude by talking about some of the secrets of successful communities. I'd like to start by just telling you a little story how I got interested in community planning. Over the last 40 years, I've worked in all 50 states and probably 1,000 communities. But my interest in this issue goes back a long way. It goes back to the Vietnam War, in fact, and I was a young lieutenant in the U.S. Army. I had just finished jungle warfare training. I had orders to a small fire base in the Central Highlands of Vietnam, and I was just about a week away from going. And then I get a call one day from the Pentagon. I have a colonel on the other end of the line. He's with the Personnel Division, and he says to me, "Lieutenant McMahon, do you have any interest in being reassigned to Germany?" And I'm like, okay, let me think about that. Germany or Vietnam? Germany, yes, Germany sounds very exciting. I would love to go to Germany. And I was extraordinarily lucky. I was sent to Heidelberg, West Germany, which is the headquarters for the U.S. military in Europe and one of the most beautiful communities on the planet Earth. And I was assigned as an aide to a United States general. I spent the next 2.5 years of my life flying all over Europe in a helicopter. And that experience completely and totally changed my life. But I, of course, didn't realize how much it had changed my life till I flew home to Birmingham, Alabama, where I grew up. And I got out of the airplane and drove home, and for the first time ever, I saw the American landscape with a completely different set of eyes. Because, ladies and gentlemen, to travel is to learn. And that's what this process is really all about. It's about learning from each other what we could do to make a great community an even greater community. So let's see if we can get our little clicker to work. No, it's, what do we do here? All righty, there we go. All right, so, you know, one of the things that I can tell you is that America is changing very, very rapidly. And I can tell you there's a lot of people in America who don't like change, particularly in small communities and rural areas. People just don't like change. But The truth is, there's only two kinds of change in the world we live in today. There's planned change and there's unplanned change. You can grow by choice or you can grow by chance. You can anticipate change, you can prepare for change, you can shape and direct change, or you can just let it happen. You know, Abraham Lincoln used to say that the best way to predict the future was to create it yourself. And once again, I believe that's what this process is about. It's about creating a future that you will like, as opposed to one you might not like so much. It's also about our children. It's about our grandchildren. It's about the future, and it's about preparing for the future. It's also about balance and harmony. It's about the relationship between conservation and economic development, between jobs and the environment, between downtown and the rest of town. It's also about finding win-win solutions to the problems that face us today. I can tell you, as somebody who travels all the time, that we spend way too much time in America fighting about what we disagree about, and not nearly enough time sitting down together, community by community, to talk about what we do agree about. And when we do that, we find there's enormous amounts of agreement. When you sit down, you break bread together, talk to each other about what really matters. What are the values that are important to us going forward? And this process, I believe, will give you an opportunity to do that. Now, Mike mentioned that I work on the process of sustainable development. A lot of people don't really understand what that is. I can tell you one thing, it's about a lot more than technology. I do spend a lot of time working on things like green buildings and energy efficiency and so forth. But if you look up the word sustainable in the dictionary, it will tell you that it means enduring. Enduring. A sustainable community, ladies and gentlemen, is a community of enduring value. You know, in ancient Athens, the city leaders of that great city used to take an oath of office to leave Athens not less, but greater, more beautiful, and prosperous than it was left to them. And I think that's the challenge facing all of our American communities today. How do we leave our communities not less, but greater, more beautiful, and prosperous than they were left to us? So, what is changing? What are some of the things that you have no control over? Well, how about the national and global economy, demographics, technology, consumer attitudes and market trends, healthcare, energy prices and sources? The weather is changing. And you have no control or very little control over those things. So you need to be able to think about how they might affect Missoula and what you could do to prepare and shape and direct those things in a way that will have more benefit than burden. So let's think about employment, for example. You know, between 1990 and the year 2000, we lost about 7% of all the manufacturing jobs in the United States, but at the same time, business and professional services went up, and healthcare and education went up even more. Did you know that today, in 60 of the 100 largest communities in America, the biggest employer is a hospital or a university? And that's a change we would have never thought about. You know, there's a big sort going on in America. When I graduated from college many years ago, you know, young people would figure out, you know, get a job offer somewhere, they'd move to that city. That doesn't happen anymore. Today, young people figure out where they want to live and they move to that city. It used to be that college graduates were evenly distributed throughout the United States based on population density. We had pretty much the same percentage everywhere. That's no longer true. Today, college graduates are clustering in certain metropolitan areas and certain smaller communities, like a Bend, Oregon, or a Fort Collins, Colorado, or a Missoula, Montana. Let me give you an example. Did you know that 45% of everyone who lives in the Raleigh-Durham area today has a college degree or higher? But in West Virginia, it's 18%. In Las Vegas, it's 19%. Turns out the young people are going the places they want to live. And, you know, so the whole economic development paradigm has changed. Some of you may have heard of a guy named Richard Florida. He wrote a book called The Creative Class. He has a new book out. It's called The Great Reset. It's about how the recession, the Great Recession, is going to change and is changing how we live, work, and move around. And what he says is that places that embrace the future will prosper, and those that do not will decline. And we'll talk about what some of those things might be. Let's talk about the economic development model. You know, once again, when I was growing up, it was all about cheap land and cheap labor and low-cost positioning. It was about shotgun recruitment and smokestack chasing. That no longer works, ladies and gentlemen. Today, it's about laser recruitment. It's not about cheap labor. It's about highly trained talent. It's about high value positioning. You know, it used to be about what you didn't have, but today, successful economic development is about what you do have. It's what we call asset-based economic development. It used to be quality of life really didn't matter, but in a world where capital is footloose, where you can locate a business anywhere in the world, it is critically important to be able to differentiate Missoula, Montana from every other community. And when I was growing up, the rural economic development program for the state of Alabama was, well, let's just widen all the highways. And then we lined all the highways with a bunch of junk. That was our rural economic development model. Today, highways are not the most important infrastructure investment. Today, it's education. The entire world of economic development is changing. And like this growth policy, it's about choices. Do you think you should try to recruit new businesses, or should you try to expand the businesses that you already have? Let's think about business recruitment for a second. We have 3,100 counties in the United States. We have 25,000 incorporated communities. They're all in competition for, you know, a literal handful of plant factories or distribution centers we build every year in America anymore to do anything. How many communities are really going to be successful in that competition? And it used to be, we thought that it was all about the one big thing. So, you know, in America, particularly in the big cities, we had this arms race first to build the biggest convention center in America. But of course, most communities will never win that arms race. So think about Cleveland, for example. Cleveland was trying to keep up with Chicago. They said, so we need to double the size of the Cleveland Convention Center, cost about $200 million. But someone says, well, you know, we could double the size of the Cleveland Convention Center. They'll triple the size of the McCormick Center in Chicago. We'll never keep up with them. But then somebody says, hey, you know, we have an asset right down the street. It's called the Cleveland Clinic, one of the world-class health facilities. Said maybe we could build a smaller convention center focused just on medical conventions and put an attached medical mart. That's what they did. That's what's called asset-based economic development. Then it was, you know, festival marketplaces, which worked fine in places like Boston and Baltimore. But did you know that there were 21 cities that built festival marketplaces, and based on the copycat logic of economic development competition? Places like Toledo, Ohio, and Jacksonville, Florida, and Norfolk, Virginia, where they all went bankrupt. Or how about aquariums? So all these cities said, well, you know, they got this big aquarium in Atlanta and Boston. We have to have one too. Even a place like Camden, New Jersey, where they said if we could just build an aquarium costing $100 million featuring the fish of New Jersey, little brown fish with lesions. No, I'm not just kidding about that. Well, they did build that aquarium. There's a picture of it. It's a very nice aquarium, but did it save Camden, New Jersey? No, it did not. And one of the reasons why is because successful economic development is rarely about the one big thing. It's about lots of little things working synergistically together off of a plan that makes sense for you and your community. You've got lots of assets here. How do you build on and enhance those assets to make a greater community? So here's another thing that's changing, demographics. America's getting older, it's getting younger, it's getting more diverse. 75% of people in every American community have no school-age children. The fastest growing form of household in America is a single person living alone. Yet for the last 25 years in America, we've built housing like every family was the Waltons. The mom, the dad, the two kids, and the dog. Okay? Well, who was building houses for single people? Unrelated singles living together, young professionals. Well, what about young people? It turns out they're getting married later or not at all. They're driving less. Turns out they want to live in walkable communities. They're adept at technology. All of those things are reshaping the American communities and our economy. The death of distance. You know, as I said before, you can locate a business anywhere in the world today. So if you cannot differentiate Missoula from any other community, you'll have no competitive advantage. Changing consumer attitudes. This is a front page story from USA Today about, you know, like malls are like totally uncool, say hip teens. What this reflects is that the average amount of time that an American spends in an enclosed mall or a strip shopping center has been going down for years. People go to buy what they want and they leave. So we might talk about what some of the alternatives to that be. Did you know that teenagers now go to malls like 40% less than they used to? Okay, what does that portend for the future of retail development in America? Market trends. The old one-size-fits-all housing model simply doesn't work in a world where we have so many different buyer groups. We have an oversupply of large lot single-family housing in almost every market in America and an undersupply of everything else. Small lot housing, cottages, attached housing, multifamily housing, you name it. You know, we can leave all the single-family houses just fine. There's, you know, but we haven't been building housing for a lot of other people. All right, so let's talk about growth. So, you know, over the last 30 or 40 years, we've done, I think, a pretty good job in the United States of saving some of the landmarks of our communities. But we've often done a way less good job of saving the landscape that gives those landmarks their larger sense of meaning. And, you know, we've also, I think, done a pretty good job of cleaning up air and water pollution. And yes, air is cleaner in America, and yes, our water is cleaner in America. But while we've been cleaning up air and water pollution, we've simultaneously been losing our sense of place. I mean, if I were to take you up in an airplane tomorrow morning and then just drop you suddenly along a road outside of most American cities, you wouldn't have any idea where you were because it all looks exactly the same. I mean, where is that? Is that Albany or Allentown or Cheyenne or Cincinnati or Providence or Pittsburgh? Who can tell? As Wallace Stegner, the great American writer, once said, he said, quote, "If you don't know where you are, you don't know who you are." And by that I think he meant that all Americans have a fundamental need for a sense of orientation, for a sense of roots, for a sense of place. Sense of place. What is that? Well, it's a couple things. First, it's what makes your hometown different from my hometown. But more importantly, ladies and gentlemen, I believe, as the mayor alluded to, that sense of place is explicitly that which makes our physical surroundings worth caring about. I can tell you that in many parts of the world today, we are suffering the social, economic, and economic consequences of creating places that simply aren't worth caring about. And for all the improvements in cleaner air, cleaner water, better roads, better schools, faster computers, people still say, is this all there is? Can't our communities be more distinctive, more livable, more beautiful? Can't we have more connection with nature and the outdoors? So let's talk about three things that you need to, well, let's talk about this first. How do you prevent Missoula from becoming any place USA? I think you've done a pretty good job of that. But let's think about, you know, some things you might want to think about. You know, you're going to grow. The question for most American communities is not whether you're going to grow and change. You're going to grow and change. The only real question is how. So let's think about the patterns of development. Where do you put it? How do you arrange it? What does it look like? Seems to me that the first principle of better development in any community is figuring out where you should not develop. There are simply some places that are better for development than other places. Tell you something funny about those houses, guess what? They're all gone now. Because building out in front of the dune line at the beach is not really the smartest thing in the world to do. You know, although we've sort of done that for years, you know, so you know, what we maybe ought to be thinking about is not just where we should develop, but where we shouldn't develop. You know, how about steep slopes or floodplains or Civil War battlefields or prime ag land? Maybe they're not the best places. And so what I want to suggest to you is not only are some places better for development than other places, but you need a long-range conservation plan, just like you need a long-range transportation plan. And you know, I spend a lot of time talking to the development community, and they say, well, what's in it for me? And I say, what's in it for them? It's called predictability and certainty. If people think all land is up for grabs everywhere, somebody's going to fight every development everywhere. It's kind of like this. You're driving down the highway at 70 miles an hour and you hit a fog bank. What are you going to do? You're going to slam the brakes on. That's exactly what American citizens wanted to do with development when they couldn't see what the future looked like. If you could decide what places in this valley are worth preserving in the future, then it will become easier to facilitate and encourage development in the places that you want it. So, where do you put development? Let's talk about a second thing. Let's talk about how we arrange development. There's all kinds of ways to arrange development. You know, we had a model for development in America in terms of how we arranged it for about 300 years, and we called it a town. And you know, the characteristics of a town, they were always pretty obvious. They had an identifiable edge and a center. You knew where the town ended and the countryside began. Towns always had a mix of uses and housing types. They were always walkable and pedestrian friendly. They were always architecturally coherent and interesting. They had a wonderful sense of place and a strong sense of community. And then starting about 1960, we just forgot about that model and we created a new model for development called Sprawl. And we have all the same things that we used to have, but the difference is now is how we arrange them on the landscape. And so with Sprawl, there's no edge and there's no center. You don't know where the town ends and the countryside begins. Every use is segregated. So we put the $400,000 houses in this subdivision, the $200,000 house in that subdivision, the shopping centers over here, the regional high school over there, and now we got to drive everywhere for everything. It's architecturally chaotic and ugly. It's very hard to have a sense of community, and there is no sense of place. So the question is, do we have any alternatives to that model which might be more attractive, more efficient, more profitable? And the answer is yes, of course we do. And it turns out that, you know, a town is not just a charming anachronism. It's actually a model for how we could build in the future. And we're going to look back, in fact, on the last 40 or 5 years or 50 years in America as an aberration, because we had a model in the world for development for thousands of years, and that was called a town also. You know, so once again, growth is about choices. Do you want to develop downtown, or do you think we should put more development out on the Strip? And by the way, I don't really think that happy face makes that better. You know, should we spread out, or should we grow more compactly, or, you know, maybe some of both? Should we put the parking in front of buildings or behind the buildings? You know, those are the kind of choices. What about the third thing? What development looks like? What development looks like? You know, Mark Twain put it this way. He said, we take stock of a city like we take stock of a man. The clothes or appearance are the externals by which we judge. You know, the National Association of Realtors puts it this way. They say community's appeal drives its economic prosperity. Let's talk about a community's front door, its gateway. And just like with meeting a person, a good first impression is important, and a bad first impression is hard to change. Do you think you would rather visit the town of Franklin, Tennessee, or would you rather go to the town of Midfield, Alabama? Which one looks more like a community you would rather invest time or money in? Which one looks like a community with a sense of pride and a sense of place? If you don't remember anything else I say tonight, remember this. The image of a community is fundamentally important to its economic well-being. What do I mean by that? What I mean is that every single day in America, people make decisions about where to live, where to invest, where to vacation, where to retire, based on what our communities look like, what they look like. You know, let's think about this. Let's talk about tourism. And tourism is actually kind of important because it is the biggest industry in the world. It's the first, second, or third biggest industry in every single American state. This is the official travel guide for the state of Washington. Notice that their slogan is, Oregon. Notice the slogan is, Oregon, things look different here. Can you imagine a travel brochure that says something like, Montana, things look the same here? Well, of course not, because what is tourism? Tourism is about visiting places that are different, unusual, and unique. The more any community in Montana comes to look just like every place else, the less reason there would be to go there. On the other hand, the more a community does to enhance its uniqueness, whether that's natural, cultural, architectural, what have you, the more people would want to go there because that's exactly what tourism is. If every place was just like every place else, there'd be no reason to go any place. So, you know, this is a new publication put out by the World Bank. It's called The Economics of Uniqueness. They talk about how sameness is not a plus in the world that we live in today. It is a minus. You know, how many of you ever heard the slogan, keep Austin weird? You ever heard that slogan? It's not just a funny slogan, it's actually an economic development imperative in the world we live in today. It means keep Austin different, keep it unusual, keep it on the cutting edge. You've got a vibe here, you've got an image, you can build on that, you can differentiate, and you've already done that. The image of a community is fundamentally important to its economic well-being. Now, I know that some people are saying, well, beauty is in the eye of the beholder. Well, okay, you think that's true? Let me ask you this question. I'm going to show you two things. Do you think this scenic view has more economic value, or do you think that scenic view has more economic value? Let me tell you what the leading real estate appraisers in the United States say about this topic. They say, quote, you can put a dollar value on a view. Scenic landscapes are an economic asset, not just because you and I think they're nice, but because other people are willing to pay to see the view and to experience the unique character of a place. They go on to say, quote, housing, hotels, offices with scenic views always command premium prices. The better the view, the higher the price. I mean, think about this. Suppose you went to a hotel in the summer with a view of the ocean. You will pay more for the hotel room that looks at the ocean than the exact same room on the other side of the hotel. What are you paying for? What I want to suggest to you is that the scenic landscapes of this valley have quantifiable economic value, which is just one of the reasons why some of these landscapes are worth preserving. You know, in fact, the National Association of Home Builders back in 1994 was trying to figure out what features would add more value to a new house than anything else. Was it like the garage, the kitchen, the kind of appliances? What was it? Well, here's what they found. They found, quote, the surrounding environment is the single most important factor affecting the market value of a home. A mountain vista or proximity to a park, water or green space affects the value of a home more than the size of the house, the number of rooms, the type of appliances, or even the presence of a swimming pool. The surrounding environment is the single most important factor affecting the market value of a home. Did you know that there are literally hundreds of studies that show that green space increases the value of adjacent property? Well, here's one example. Where's the most valuable land in all of New York State? There it is. It's the land next to Central Park. Let me give you another example. You know, we have 15,500 golf course developments in America. Why do we have 15,500 golf course developments with houses next to the golf course? Because developers figured out that they could charge a lot premium, up to 30%, for a house next to a golf course over and above the exact same house not next to a golf course. But guess what? Did you know that the vast majority of buyers in golf course developments in America do not play golf? So you interview them and say, well, why'd you buy the house there? They go, oh, we like the view across the fairway. We like to live next to protected open space. Well, duh. What does it cost to build a golf course? Millions of dollars. What's it cost to maintain a golf course? Millions of dollars. What does it cost to leave the open space alone in the first place? Like almost nothing. So a growing number of developers started to figure out that they could build a golf course development without the golf course. And by the way, what can you do there? Well, you can't play golf, but you can walk your dog, you can throw a frisbee, you can have a picnic, you can do anything you want. And by the way, what is the most popular form of outdoor recreation in the United States? Walking. Walking for pleasure. All right, I'll just say a few words about historic preservation. What is the value of historic buildings, neighborhoods, and landscapes? Well, some of you have probably read some of Thomas Wolfe's famous novels. He's the guy that penned the immortal line, "You can't go home again." Well, sadly, Tom Wolfe, he can't go home again to his original house, because here it is. It's in this parking lot down in Asheville, North Carolina. Why are historic buildings important? I'll tell you why. Because first and foremost, these are the places that physically connect us to the past. These are the places that tell us who we are and where we came from. As Daniel Webster once wrote, he said, quote, "The man who feels no sentiment or veneration for the memory of his forefathers is himself unworthy of kindred regard and remembrance." At its essence, saving the historic buildings of any community is about saving the heart and soul of a community. But it's also incredibly important to your economic well-being as well. Let me give you a few examples. So this used to be the fire station in a small town in southern Indiana, Madison, Indiana. It became obsolete as a fire station, and a guy bought it and turned it into a pizza parlor. And like so many small towns, this was a town going downhill. And so they brought in something called the Main Street program, a very powerful tool for economic revitalization, and they started working with the owners of downtown buildings to restore their facades, and they did that. You know, kind of tells a story about the history of the building, but guess what else happened? Sales of pizza almost doubled and sustained that over a multi-year period. So let me give you a couple of nationally famous examples. Welcome to New Orleans. This is a place I worked extensively in after Hurricane Katrina. And we were asked, I was with the group of planners and engineers that was asked to put together a redevelopment plan for the city. And so we, of course, and they didn't want just a physical redevelopment plan, they wanted an economic redevelopment plan. So we said to, you know, the governor and the mayor and all these people, well, what are the biggest industries? Is the biggest industry in New Orleans, is it the seafood industry, the sugar industry, the chemical industry, the oil industry? They said, no, no, no. The biggest industry in the entire state of Louisiana is the tourism industry. And what is the engine of that industry? Well, there it is. It's called the French Quarter. Ladies and gentlemen, that is more important and more valuable than any plant, factory, or distribution center in the state of Louisiana. But did you know that for maybe 40 years, the state of Louisiana wanted to put a freeway through the middle of the French Quarter? Let me give you another example. Let's go to Texas and visit the San Antonio Riverwalk. That's the #1 destination in the entire state of Texas. That's the basis of that city's multi-billion-dollar year annual tourism industry. But at one point in the past, the City Council of San Antonio thought so little of that small river, they actually wanted to put it underground into a culvert. Today, it is the most visited place in all of Texas. Let's fly out to Seattle and go to the Pike Place Farmers Market, the #1 destination in the entire state of Washington. Millions of visitors go there every year. And yet about 35 years ago, there were 2 people on the Seattle City Council who seriously proposed tearing down the Pike Place Market. Why? They said, well, we need more downtown parking. Like parking for what? You can have all the parking in the world if there's nothing to do. Why would anyone want to go there? You know, if you have a parking problem, that means you're successful. You know, so they saved that place and they love and revere it and recognize it for the economic engine that it is. How about Florida? What's the biggest destination in Florida? Disney World. What's #2? There it is. It's called the Art Deco Historic District in South Miami Beach. The largest collection of Art Deco buildings in the United States. But they were all going to be torn down. People were saying, well, we've got to have more high-rise condos in South Florida. You don't think they have enough high-rise condos in South Florida today? Today, people come from all over the world to visit this place. You know, how about the Camden Yards Baseball Stadium in Baltimore, Maryland? Probably the most influential sports stadium ever built in the North American continent. Not just because it was a new stadium, but because it was the first of the so-called retro stadiums. Did the best job of integrating new construction with historic buildings that surrounded that site. Became the model for virtually all baseball stadium development in America. Notice that the field is 12 feet below the street level. Why? Because they didn't want the stadium to tower over the row houses that surround the stadium. It was a good neighbor. Well, there's a concept. Having new development be a good neighbor with old development. You know, Arthur Fromer, who's America's leading travel writer, put it this way. He says, among cities and towns with no particular recreational appeal, those that preserve their past continue to enjoy tourism. Those that haven't receive almost no tourists at all. Tourists simply won't go to a city or town that has lost its soul. But I want to tell you, you know, preservation is important for reasons that go well beyond tourism. You know, this is in Cincinnati, one of the most blighted neighborhoods you ever saw. Preservation has brought this neighborhood back to life. And by the way, it turns out that when you restore an historic building, you create more jobs. You use less material and less energy than when you're building new. So there's lots of good reasons for preservation. Let's talk about downtown for a second. This is an economic development magazine for essentially, you know, industrial park developers. Notice the headline. It says, when sites searching the South, make sure you inspect a community's downtown first. Why would an industrial developer care about a downtown? I'll tell you why. Because they figured out if you don't have a healthy downtown, you don't have a healthy town. It's, you know, the apple rots from the inside out. You know, so, you know, when you invest in a downtown, you're investing in the entire town, because that's the first thing people will look at when they come to a community, is what the downtown is like. What we've learned in America, ladies and gentlemen, is it's kind of hard to be a suburb of nothing. So you have a great downtown. That's an asset you can build on. But here's a question that I think you need to think about. What are you building today that will be worth preserving in the future? What buildings will your children and your grandchildren fight to save 50 years from now? And I ask that question for a couple of reasons. Because more than 80% of everything ever constructed in America has been built since the end of World War II. And a lot of it is just plain junk. You know, it's kind of like this Kentucky Fried Chicken franchise with the red plastic mansard roof. It's replaced a house similar to the one you see in the background. It's also important because, as Winston Churchill once wrote, he said, quote, we shape our buildings and then our buildings shape us. So what did he mean? I think he meant that the physical character of our communities affects who we are as a people, as a nation. It affects whether we can even have a sense of community. You know, we live in a nation of highly varied history, climate, culture, and terrain. And so many of our communities look like they're being built with Legos. Interchangeable parts. Ask yourself this question. Do you think every chain store and every franchise in America has to look exactly alike? Whether it's in Maine or Maryland or Missouri or Missoula, Montana? The answer to that, ladies and gentlemen, is no. Any building can fit in with your community and can complement the quality of the landscape. That is a new McDonald's. It's in a little town in eastern Long Island called New Hyde Park, New York. I want to tell you something funny about that McDonald's. Guess what? Prospective brides go there to pose for their bridal photographs. Not something you say every day about a McDonald's in America, now is it? But I want to tell you something. This is going on all over the United States and all over the world. Let me just show you a couple of examples. This is a new McDonald's in a little town called Stowe, Vermont. You know, it looks like a New England-style building. Why is that? Because it's in New England. Don't you think that buildings in one part of America ought to be different from buildings in another part of America? Shouldn't a new McDonald's in New England be different from a new McDonald's in the Southwest? And shouldn't a new McDonald's in the Southwest be different from a new McDonald's in the Southeast? And shouldn't a new McDonald's in the Southeast be different from a new McDonald's in the Midwest? And shouldn't a new McDonald's in California be different from a new McDonald's in North Carolina? And shouldn't a new McDonald's in a small city like Annapolis, Maryland, be different from one in a big city like St. Louis, Missouri? Yeah, that's a McDonald's at the foot of the Gateway Arch, built by a savvy developer who realized that when food was no longer the novelty, and correct me if I'm wrong, are hamburgers still a novelty in America? He realized that good design could be. Now, I know you're saying to yourself, well, you can't do that in Montana. Well, yes, you can. Here's West Yellowstone. You say, well, how do they do this? I'll tell you how they did this. They asked for this. If you accept off-the-shelf corporate cookie-cutter architecture, you're going to get it 100% of the time. If you start insisting on something that fit with your community, you could get that 100% of the time. Now, I'm not telling you it's easy. No, it is not easy, but it is going on all over America and all over the world. And let me give you an example. So this is another McDonald's. That's the first McDonald's in the United States that went into an historic building. That's in the town of Freeport, Maine. That's where the L.L. Bean Company is headquartered, and that is called the Gore House. It was built in 1833. And in 1980, McDonald's optioned that site. They wanted to tear down that house. They wanted to put up their typical suburban-style McDonald's. The town of Freeport said no. And McDonald's sued them, and they lost. And then they sued the town a second time, and they lost again. But guess what? 3 years later, a picture of that McDonald's appeared in their annual corporate report as an example of their good community stewardship. But I want to tell you something, they're not suing anybody for this anymore. They're doing this all over the world, but only in communities that are savvy enough to say, I want something that fits with my town. I don't want your off-the-shelf model. What you need to know about chain stores and franchises is that every single one has Plan A, Plan B, and Plan C, and what gets built depends on you. It's kind of like the Good Witch of the West said in The Wizard of Oz, you have the power. You've always had the power. You know, but people just don't know this. So here's your typical Plan A Pizza Hut. You've all seen those. All you got to do is ask, they'll give you the brown roof. What do you want, the red roof, brown roof? You try a little harder, you get Plan C. And by the way, all the Plan Cs are different because every place is different. So what about like chain drugstores like a Walgreens or a CVS or a Rite Aid? So here's your typical off-the-shelf Walgreens. Let me show you a little better. Well, there's Plan B. How about Plan C? And as I said before, all the Plan Cs are different because every place is different. So here's your typical Rite Aid. Let me show you another Rite Aid. The building I'm about to show you is not a new building. I mean, it's not an historic building. It's a brand new building. There's a new Rite Aid, Camden, Maine. They said, we want our drugstore to look like it belongs in New England. Here's one, Davidson, North Carolina. You know, and you know, they brought the building right up to the street. They put the parking in the back. It's a two-story building, and of course, CVS told them they couldn't do any of that. And what did Davidson say? Well, fine. Goodbye. No, okay, let's talk about that. You know, you just need to be willing to stick to your guns. Here's a typical Taco Bell. Here's another one. This is Fort Collins, Colorado. Or how about this one in Chesterfield, Virginia? Or how about gas stations? You know, I was in this little town called Old Forge, New York, and I was giving this talk kind of like this. And Old Forge, New York, as far as I can tell, does no rules or regulations against anything. But about a week after I was there, this company called On the Run, they show up and they want to build a new gas station and convenience store. And the people on the planning commission kind of start going off on them. They say, we want an Adirondack-style building. And they go, what's that? And they go, well, drive around town, look at these 10 buildings, and come back and talk to us. That's what they built. Because they asked. Okay? Because they asked. All right. Let's talk about how the development world is changing. Here's the old model. And let me tell you what the new model is. Strip retail, ladies and gentlemen, is retail for the last century. The future belongs to town centers and main streets and mixed-use development. And there's a lot of reasons why that is true. You know, let's talk about them one by one. Did you know that we've completely overbuilt on the Strip outside of town in every place in America? And you know, we went from 4 square feet of retail space per person to more than 40. We have double the retail space per person of any other country in the world. But if the recession didn't teach us anything else, it told us we were overstored, particularly out on the Strip. So we have the largest retail vacancy rate in American history right now, 1.1 billion square feet of vacant retail space, mostly in empty big box stores out on the Strip. And part of the reason is because we were building retail space 5 times faster than retail sales for 20 years. And so we were cannibalizing one shopping center, would cannibalize the next one. And then, you know, what about the internet? Well, it's changing bricks and mortar retailing. So, you know, people send emails instead of Hallmark cards anymore. They don't go to Blockbuster anymore. They have streaming video, et cetera, et cetera. And by the way, all the big box stores are shrinking because places like Staples and Office Depot now do a majority of their business online. So they don't need 25,000 square foot stores anymore. They want to be in 5,000 square foot stores. This means they can come back downtown. Okay, so the retail model is changing. This is a story from New York Times about what's happening with malls in America. Did you know that we haven't built a single new mall in the United States since the year 2006? Did you know that 10% of all the malls have closed in that same period? We're going to close another 10% in the next 5 years. And that of all the remaining ones, a majority are being turned inside out. Let me give you an example. Welcome to Lakewood, Colorado, where we used to have something called the Villa Italia Mall. It's been torn down and turned into a 22 square block mixed-use development called Belmar. It just gives Lakewood a downtown they never had. Let me give you another example, kind of a metaphor for America. This is Rockville, Maryland. It's the county seat for the most populous county in Maryland, Montgomery County. And in 1972, in their infinite wisdom, they decided to tear down their entire downtown and replace it with those two lovely buildings you see in the background back there, including the Rockville Mall, a 200-store mall surrounded by 50 acres of parking. Well, guess what? Now they've torn the mall down. They put the downtown back. And ladies and gentlemen, this is going on all over America. We're going to look back on this era as an aberration. This is the new promised land. You know, Joni Mitchell used to sing, you know, we tear up paradise and put in a parking lot. Now we can tear up the parking lots and put our towns back together. You know, so you've got these sites all over, including here. You know, they're underperforming giant parking lots along strips that you got, you know, you already got sewer and water out there. You already got transportation out there. You know, you can redevelop those places. And let me show you some examples. So here's your Best Buy that we've done for years, spread out, single use, drive only. Here's another Best Buy. This is a little town called St. Louis Park, Minnesota. Or here's another Best Buy with 4 floors of housing upstairs. Now, I know everybody doesn't want to sleep upstairs and shop downstairs, but mixed use can be pretty simple, even in a small town. Let me give you an example. This is a brand new Dairy Queen in the town of Herndon, Virginia. It has a dentist office upstairs. How appropriate. You know, what's more important? Is it you know, would you rather live next door to a house full of out-of-control teenagers or a dentist office? Which one's going to have more impact on your quiet enjoyment? It's not the use, it's the impact of the use. And let's talk about the economics of this. I was in Fayetteville, Arkansas last fall, and I saw these 2 Waffle Houses. And one is right off you fly into Bentonville, and that's where the airport is. And I was driving down the interstate, and I got off the interstate, and there's this Waffle House right at the interstate exit. And then I went into downtown Fayetteville, and there's another Waffle House in a brand new building with 3 floors of apartments upstairs. And I thought that was kind of interesting. And so I went to the city hall, and I went into the planning department, and I said, hey, tell me about those 2 Waffle Houses. And here's what they tell me, that the mixed-use Waffle House downtown is making 15% more than the one out on the Strip. It's also producing more taxes per acre. It has more jobs per acre, has more residents per acre, and it's figures like this that tell you why the future belongs to mixed-use development, because it performs better economically. And then there's something called design. We convened about 100 developers and asked them, what are the distinguishing characteristics of suburban strips? You know what they told us? Well, number 1, they're ugly, and number 2, they're congested. Try imagine running a successful marketing campaign around that slogan. Hey, shop here, we're both ugly and congested. Come on down. And what do you think happens to that if gas ever reaches $5 a gallon in the United States? That is a format without a future. You know, but we have a format that has a future. It's called our towns. And you know, we have something in the real estate world that's called the place-making dividend. You know what that means? It means people stay longer, come back more often, and spend more money in places that attract their affection. Places that attract their affection. And it even is affecting things like Walmart. There's the old Walmart model. Here's the new Walmart model. It's in a 2-story building, which means you use half as much land, which means it fits better with the community, it means you can put it back downtown. Like this Walmart that opened last week in Tysons Corner, Virginia. A Walmart with 4 floors of housing on top. Here's the new Walmart in Washington, D.C. That is not an historic building. That's a brand new building. Where's the parking? It's under the building. There's a swimming pool on the roof. There's a fitness center in the glass area. There's real windows that let in real sunlight into the floor of the Walmart. Wow, who could have thought? All right, I want to end by talking about the secrets of successful communities. I said I've been in this business for 40 years. I've come to some conclusions about why some communities are successful and a lot more are not. And I want to tell you that first and foremost, successful communities have a vision for the future. Some people might call that a plan for the future. And I can tell you that growing up in a state like Alabama, there's people who will tell you they're against planning, and I'm sure the people in Montana will tell you the same thing. But I always say to those folks, okay, then you tell me the name of any successful organization, institution, corporation, or community that doesn't plan for the future. Failing to plan simply means planning to fail. As the book of Proverbs says, without vision, the people will perish. Try to imagine a corporation that didn't have a business plan. It would have a very hard time attracting new investors. The same is true with a community. You got to have a plan for the future. It's called a blueprint. And successful plans begin by inventorying your assets. And then successful communities build their plans, whether it's a land use plan, an economic development plan, a tourism plan, whatever, around the enhancement of their existing assets. Successful communities use education, incentives, partnerships, and voluntary initiatives, not just regulation. Now, I'm not against all regulation. We need regulations. They prevent bad things from happening. They set a minimum standard of conduct, but you got to use carrots, not just sticks. Successful communities pick and choose among development proposals. All development is not created equal. Do you know what the biggest impediment to better development in America is? I'll tell you what it is. It's a fear of saying no to anything. Well, if you're afraid to say no to anything, you will get the worst of everything. Communities that set no standards or low standards will simply compete to the bottom. Communities that set high standards will compete to the top, because they know if you say no to bad development, you will always get better development in its place. Successful communities cooperate with their neighbors for mutual benefit, the city, the county, etc. Successful communities consider what they look like, not just ecology and economics. Successful communities have strong leaders and committed citizens. Let me show you a couple of communities that have used some of these ideas. Welcome to Chattanooga, Tennessee. It was called the most polluted city in America, routinely referred to as a patch of rust in the Sun Belt, but nobody makes fun of Chattanooga anymore. Now it's known as an international model for sustainable development and community revitalization. It all began with a plan for the future. And they decided to focus on 2 big things. First, downtown, because that's the heart and soul of any community. And second, the Tennessee River, because that was their most important natural asset. And when they started, all of downtown used to look like that. And they didn't take the biggest project first, they took the smallest project first, because they realized that nothing succeeds like success. So one person restored their building, and then some other people said, how'd you do that? And another person restored the building. Then they started doing bigger projects. That's the Outlet Mall in Chattanooga. It's not out on the strip somewhere, it's in downtown, and 5 restored warehouse buildings. And then they had this thing called the Tennessee River Gorge. 15 minutes from downtown, they set up the first land trust in the South. It's called the Tennessee River Gorge Trust. Now all of that is preserved. They saved their view and got a tax break too. And then they said, let's build a park all along the Tennessee River for 10 miles. And the price tag was a lot for a small city, $15 million in 1975. That was a big number. But I want to tell you something. How much something cost is not the most important question. It's the second most important question. What is the most important question facing Missoula, Montana? It's what should we do? What should we do? And as it turns out, money always follows good ideas, particularly if those ideas come out of a consensus building process. So they built that park, and it's attracted literally hundreds of millions of dollars directly adjacent to it. A $15 million public investment attracted almost $1 billion in private investment. And because they had a vision for the future, they were able to do some pretty remarkable things. This is the Walnut Street Bridge, an obsolete highway bridge in downtown Chattanooga, and the Tennessee DOT was going to tear it down. They'd set aside $4.5 million for the demolition of the bridge, but the city said, no, we got a better idea. Why don't you give us the same amount of money and let us turn into the nation's longest pedestrian bridge? Now connects one side of the Chattanooga, Tennessee River with the other. Welcome to Susan City, California. In 1980, was voted the worst place to live in Northern California. This was their city hall. It was in 2 double-wide trailers. This was the only city hall in California you had to register with the Department of Motor Vehicles. But you know, public buildings are kind of important. And you know, public buildings really should set the standard in our communities, and they always did before World War II. They were always our most beautiful buildings, whether it was the courthouse or the public school or the library or whatever. And then we decided that cheaper was better. And you know what we've learned? We've learned that cheaper is simply cheaper. And you know what they said in Susan City, California? They said, why would anybody invest in a community that wouldn't invest in itself? So they said, we need to set the standard in our community. So they built a new city hall right on that same spot. And guess what? 1 decade later, they were voted one of the best places to live in Northern California. But it all began with an investment in themselves. Let me give you another example. Welcome to Port Royal, South Carolina, the gateway to the Parris Island Marine Corps base. It was a little town going nowhere. Here was their city hall. But they said the same thing. They said, we need to set the standard. So they tore that building down, put up this building. And that attracted the attention of some developers, and they found this piece of land right next to downtown. And this guy decides to extend the street grid of downtown right into this piece of land. He didn't put a bunch of cul-de-sacs in there, he just extended the street grid. Then he went to a local architect and said, could you design some new houses for me that look like old South Carolina houses? They said, yeah, we could do that. He built 41 new houses, and they all sold in 6 months. All sold, 6 months, 41 new houses. And those 41 houses changed this town forever for the better. And because we had 41 new families living in town, everything started to change. So this was what their downtown was like. It was one boarded up building after another. But now we got 41 new families living downtown. So they start to look at this with a different set of eyes, and they start restoring the buildings one after another. Then they have this little elementary school, and they decide that it's too small and it's outmoded, and they need to tear the school down. They want to move out to the strip outside of town. But the new families say, well, don't do that, because nobody will be able to walk to school anymore. They said, why don't you put an addition on the school? They go, oh, never thought of that. So they put this little addition on the school. Now all the kids in the whole town walk to school. And then they said, you know, the post office is, you know, too small. We got to tear it down. We got to move out of downtown. But the post office, as a community institution, ought to be downtown. And they said, you're going to stay downtown, and then you're going to build us a beautiful neoclassical post office. And they did that. Successful communities inventory their assets: natural, cultural, human, economic, educational. They build their plans around their assets. Sometimes those assets are very obvious. Welcome to Jackson Hole, you know, Wyoming. Unparalleled wildlife resources, world-class scenery, pretty obvious. Or welcome to Annapolis, Maryland. Unbelievable historic and architectural legacy, but they built all their plans around that. Sometimes the assets are not very obvious. Welcome to Lowell, Massachusetts. 1975 was a dying industrial city. It had an unemployment rate of 28%. It thought it had no assets, and it had never seen a single tourist. But what it had was good leadership and abandoned textile mills, all of which have now been restored. Today, this is the Charleston, South Carolina of New England. Today, they get almost 1 million tourists a year. It all began with a vision for the future. How about Columbus, Georgia in 1991? They had a terrible flood along the Chattahoochee River. But they realized that adversity could breed opportunity, so they built a new riverwalk in its place. It's one of the finest riverwalks in the South. Or how about the torpedo factory in Alexandria, Virginia, now the most successful art center in the United States? Or how about downtown Rapid City, which didn't have a square, but they had lots of parking. They decided to take the parking out and put a square back. Brought downtown back to life. Or how about Paducah, Kentucky, where they had all these flood walls, which are now art galleries. You know, or how about the High Bridge in Poughkeepsie, New York? That's 275 feet above the Hudson River, an abandoned railroad bridge. It burned in 1973, sat abandoned for many years, and the state of New York was going to tear it down. But once again, this is a city that said, we got a better idea. We're going to turn it into a state park. This small town now attracts 600,000 people a year to walk across the Hudson, 275 feet up. Successful communities use education, incentives, partnerships, and voluntary initiatives. Why do we educate? In order to reduce the need to regulate. Why do we educate? Because people won't embrace what they don't understand. Why do we educate? Because you, the citizens of Missoula, have a right to choose the future, but also to know what the choices are. We need to use incentives, carrots, not just sticks. Let me show you an example of an incentive. Here's an abandoned brewery in San Antonio, Texas. Sat vacant for 20 years till they used an historic preservation tax credit to turn it into a world-class museum of art. Or how about Yazoo City, Mississippi? And all they did was pass out free paint. Brought their downtown back to life. Successful communities pick and choose. All development is not created equal. Successful communities have a quality of life lobby, a group of people willing to work to see that your vision actually gets implemented. And I know it is not always easy getting things done in small communities in America. And I tell you, that no matter what you come up with in your growth policy, there will be people who will be against it. There will be people who will tell you cannot do it, won't work, costs too much, tried it already. And no is a powerful word in America. But do you know what's a more powerful word? Yes. Yes, we can make Missoula a better place to live in, to look at, to work in, to visit. A pessimist sees difficulty in every opportunity. An optimist sees opportunity in every difficulty. And you know, if you don't care who gets the credit, you can get an awful lot done in America. You know, I love this quote from Monty Python about our elected officials from the movie Life of Brian. They're talking about the Romans. They say, apart from sanitation, medicine, education, wine, public order, roads, irrigation, public health, and a freshwater system, what have the Romans ever done for us? Ladies and gentlemen, a vision is important, but implementation is priceless. Thank you so much for having me here this evening. Thanks, Bob.
Wow, I've been an urban planner for 40 years too, and I'm excited. How about you folks? We have a few minutes for questions. Questions for Ed. Yes, sir.
You mentioned a lot about planning and community. There wasn't a lot about the culture of a community, and then also in Missoula, we have a valley, and the expansion is going to have to take place in a unique way that's not like other cities. And some of the proposals there, in the size of our valley here, you're going to get I'm kind of thinking, what's coming to my mind is a chocolate chip city with the same chocolate chips spread out throughout the valley.
Well, in reference to your first thing, I mean, I certainly could have talked about culture, and I often do, and that's obviously a critical thing. And culture is one of those assets that I think that a community like this has, and you need to build on that. In reference to your second thing, that's really about the choices you have. You can grow up or you can grow out. You can grow more compact, you can grow more spread out. You know, I showed you a Walmart that's in a 2-story building. Well, that means you use half as much land. It could be, visited yesterday a new 4-story Target in a little town called Merrifield, Virginia. 4 stories.
I've been to Richmond.
Yeah. So you know, and what is that, you know, and the only big issue for these companies for years was, well, how do you get the shopping cart up and down? Well, of course, the answer was, well, hey, we did figure out how to put a man on the moon. I think we can figure out how to get the shopping carts up and down. And they have escalators for your shopping cart, go right down next to you. And that's like what we used to call a department store. And so, yeah, there's different models for things. And if you want to, you know, you want this whole valley to be developed, well, you could do that. You can spread out all over the valley. You can have 5-acre, 10-acre lots and just boop, 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 boop. Or you could maybe do things a little differently. So that's one of the things that this growth policy, I hope, we'll talk about and we'll decide. Yes, ma'am.
So how do you keep things affordable? Because I feel like a lot of these communities, and I'm not familiar with all the ones you shared about, I mean, they're great places to live, like Boulder and Bend, and who doesn't want to live in these towns,
Yep.
Missoula for that matter. but they also often seem to kind of price out poor people.
Yeah, well, you know, there's two things about that. You know, a lot of the communities that are unaffordable today are unaffordable because they're successful and people want to live there. And also, so we have these great price differentiations in America, and because, you know, if we had high quality development every place, we wouldn't have that price differential. And yeah, but, you know, affordable housing, there's no one simple answer to that. There's lots of answers to that. So, you know, you need an affordable housing policy. You need to be able to do things like have housing above stores, or maybe accessory units, what we used to call mother-in-law suites, or maybe garage apartments, or maybe multifamily housing but not next to single-family housing. Maybe it's out on that strip above like a Home Depot. I was just in Vancouver, where they have their affordable housing, 5 stories of affordable housing above a Home Depot. You know, imagine that. So there's no one answer. You need a lot of places. We have an inclusionary housing ordinances. A lot of places that require 10, 15% of every development to have below market rate housing. You know, that's one way to do it. But there's lots of different ways. There's no one simple answer, but you need to think about that. Something you got to plan for is how to keep because the more attractive you become, the more successful you become, the more people will want to live here. That will put upward pressure on prices. Would you rather have low prices or high prices? Would you rather have, you know, make money in real estate or no money in real estate? You know, I can guarantee you there's a lot of places you can go and find affordable housing in America, like Wheeling, West Virginia, or Erie, Pennsylvania, or Detroit, Michigan, where you can get a house for $18,000. But, you know, unfortunately, it's because it's a city in decline, and you're in a city on the way up. So you got to plan for success, because you are successful and you're going to be more successful.
I appreciated the illustrations in your presentation, and so I was wondering, can you give us some illustrations of some places with sort of effective, visionary, steadfast, quality of life lobbies?
Yeah, well, one of the places is a place that I grew up, Birmingham, Alabama. We had something called Operation New Birmingham. You know, Birmingham, what were we known for? We were known for steel and civil rights. We were the Johannesburg of America. And you know, Birmingham and Atlanta used to be the same size. And you know, the big decision was Delta Airlines was trying to figure out where to put their world headquarters. And they had a choice, Atlanta or Birmingham. Atlanta's motto was, we're the city too busy to hate. And Birmingham said, if you come to here, you have to have a segregated workforce. They went to Atlanta, and the rest was history. And we became literally this failed city. And what brought us back together was something called Operation New Birmingham. And it started off with the business community, the white business community, sitting down with the black civil rights community once every 2 weeks for 2 years. They had breakfast together, no press invited. It was that dialogue that brought that city back off of its knees. And it's that kind of thing that you can create in any community. One of the things I would suggest to you, and you may already have that, is that Missoula needs a forum for dialogue about the future. And you know, we have too many, as I said when I started, we spend too much time fighting about what we disagree about. But I would almost guarantee that the values that people in this room share are very similar. How we reflect those values may differ. But you know, as Stephen Covey in his book, you know, The 7 Habits of Highly Successful Individuals said, seek first to understand and then to be understood. You know, put first things first. You know, all those same habits are the habits of successful communities. And so, yeah, there are hundreds of communities that have these forums for dialogues, that have gone through a visioning, that have good community leadership. And, you know, you can cite them all. I was just in a community a couple weeks ago called Rifle, Colorado. This community was crushed when Amoco pulled out practically overnight some years ago. But they got a quality of life lobby that worked to bring that little small town back to life. And there's places like that all over the country. I was in Fort Collins just 2 weeks ago, and they just opened the first bus rapid transit system in a small city in the West. And a dedicated right-of-way connects, you know, Colorado State University with downtown, with their mall, on a dedicated right-of-way. It's free for the first 6 months of operation. You know, it's kind of like, who'd have thought? that you could do that in a community like that. So, you know, it all starts with you. And you know, one of the things that I think this process I would remind you about is that none of us are as smart as all of us, which is why you need to make your voice heard, because you've got the ideas that can make this place even better than it is. Thanks, Bob.
Thank you once again.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
Ed will be around at the end, as we all will. If you have further questions, maybe approach Ed later on. But we have a few more things to share with you this evening, and we need to get on with it. One thing that I want to share with you is, how do you participate in this process? How do you participate in this process that Ed just described? And you're all lucky people tonight, because I'm going to cut mine mercifully short and get right down to it and address that very issue. How do we participate? Casey, could I get you just to go to the process slide, please? Yes, okay, thank you. I had a lot of comments to make about the value of planning, but I can't top Ed, so we're going to skip right past that. You all know how a growth policy is adopted, okay? Somebody bangs a gavel, opens a public hearing, a bunch of people get up and talk, they bang a gavel, and they make a motion. That is not the way to involve the community in a planning process. That is not the way to get public input. That is not the way to make your growth policy a true vision for the future. This illustration basically maps out what the city of Missoula came up with for the community involvement program. And for community involvement that matters, that guides the process and is actually used, we have to go back to the beginning. In this case, the beginning will be a series of listening sessions. And this series of listening sessions, actually the staff has already begun by running some community events like Sunday Streets and other types of community gatherings. But through these listening sessions, we hope to hear from individuals and representatives that deal with particular community issues on a regular basis and get a sense of what they perceive to be the biggest concerns and assets. And the city will establish a list of topics and would entertain suggested topics from other members of the community. Okay? If you see some topics that aren't up here, or if you want to explore them with the community, you can do that. The city will establish dates and a time and post the information on our website, and that's ourmissoula.org, as well as contact interested citizens and councils. Now, what happens at these listening sessions? We expect a lot of ideas to get generated, a lot of issues to be raised, a lot of problems to be discussed, okay? We expect a tremendous amount of information and brain power to produce a lot about what we want to address in the growth policy at these listening sessions. What happens at the listening sessions then gets packaged and moved on to the focus groups. The focus groups, there will be 6 focus groups in specific topic areas. They're listed on the screen: economic health, environmental quality, safety and wellness, livability, housing, community design. What those focus groups will do is take the information and issues generated, okay, in the community, okay, with the listening sessions and the other activities that staff will be doing around the community, and say, how do we translate these into policy? How do we translate these things into approaches to address these issues and solve these problems? Okay? That's where the plan begins to take shape. Their work, they hand it off to the steering committee. Okay? The steering committee will review the policies and recommendations of the 6 different focus groups, provide feedback to the focus groups, and work with the staff to refine the goals, objectives, and recommended actions that will provide the basic framework for the growth policy. And the steering committee will help consolidate the recommendations and ensure that there's a consistency among the discrete focused topics, so that ultimately what comes out of the steering committee process is cohesive, unified, and reflects an overall community vision. And we expect the steering committee will be made up of representatives of each focus group, planning board members, and other members of the city resource team, which is city agencies. So when we map it all out, this is basically what it looks like. I want to call your attention to the box on the bottom right, and that's the continuous community feedback process. And this represents the use of the growth policy website, okay? Community meetings, visioning sessions, and general outreach of all kinds that will take place throughout the process. In other words, you, the community, will have the opportunity, okay, all throughout the process to keep raising issues, to keep making comments, to review drafts of planning elements, to review drafts, goals, objectives, policies, recommended actions, data, trends, and make comment back back to the city, okay, on those things on a continuous process. There is no deadline for a good idea. There is no deadline for a comment. So, to summarize, that's the process we have. Raising issues, developing information, and listening sessions, okay? Translating that into policy and approaches in the focus groups, getting those policies and approaches in a cohesive, consistent fashion, okay, that represents the community vision, and building the plan on that. So you have opportunities to get involved every step of the way. You can be involved as much or as little as you like. We want you involved, and we want you involved a lot. That's the process in a very, very quick nutshell. Yes, sir?
Are any of these listening sessions going to be held with the whole group together, all the groups together? Because ideas generate ideas, and certainly the schools have something to do with the parks, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, you're absolutely correct. Could I get Lavelle to address that, please?
The idea with the listening sessions is intended to be more topic-based, but there will be reporting and sharing of all that information after we've gathered all the information. And then other opportunities for more community input at larger meetings along the way. I mean, we anticipate at least a couple more meetings that are large community meetings where you can share. I mean, it gets, the policy planning process has to cover so many subjects that we find we have to focus in on a few things at different points in the way. So these are intended to be more topic-based, although I would have to say one of the groups that we call it a group is neighborhoods, and that is hearing from residents on many different aspects, and we're expecting to probably hold at least 3 of those. So that might be one way that just generally you'll be covering a few things. Okay?
No. I understand why you have to divide it up into all those groups. I totally understand that. But why don't they come together at some point so they can discuss all these ideas and maybe find out some of the bumps in the road?
Okay, I think I heard Lavelle say that they actually will, okay? That there will be, in addition to the meetings of the focus groups, okay, there will be community meetings at which we do just that, at which we bring all these things together, okay? In addition, as the focus groups do their work, as I said before, they'll be generating policy approaches, recommendations, things to address the issues that arise in the listening sessions, okay? So you'll have the opportunity to comment on that as well, either individually in groups, through the website, or through the additional community meetings we've been talking about. What I skipped over, because we're running a little behind tonight, are a number of things that the staff will be doing, going out to the neighborhoods, community functions like the Sunday streets, things of that nature, that will take place simultaneously with the listening sessions and will continue to take place throughout the process. So I hear what you're saying, I understand, and it's like Mr. McMahon said, all of us together are smarter than one of us individually, but there will be ample opportunity for that.
That's why all the groups should meet together at some point.
At some point they will, yes, sir. Yes?
I thought that Mr. McMahon made a really good point.
I thought that Mr. McMahon made a really good point about the importance of inventorying our assets. And where is that going to happen in here? Or perhaps our good planning staff already knows what they are. I mean, I know a lot of that has been done, but it seems really like a key take-home from his talk.
Right, and that's classically part of the planning process. That's one of the first things you do. It has been done, and it will be done. Will continue to be done, I should say. The planning staff has already produced what we call community profile type data. Okay, our population trends, our demographic trends, our economic trends, our job creation, basically a snapshot of the community and where we're going in the future with these trends. So, yeah, that's being done. In addition, what we've been talking about as late as today is a process of asset mapping, where it's a specific focused exercise of identifying a community's assets just exactly as I described it. Yes, sir.
I brought the same question before. It seems like the listening sessions, all the focus groups should come together and have a totally open session, and everybody has their own interests together. And it should be kind of a free, open session to discuss all the ideas even before they have their individual sessions. And that seems to be a better way to look at the whole community, as this other gentleman mentioned and I talked about before the meeting.
Okay, so let me respond to that. What we have to do with these focus groups, we have 6 focus groups because, you know, the growth and development of the city is a big issue, and we need to break that down into bite-sized pieces. The work after the focus groups have done their work, that will be presented to the community, and there'll be ample opportunities to comment on that. And then, as was discussed earlier, then the steering committee made up of folks from all of those focus groups will come together in order to you know, refine and come up with a cohesive plan. So there's plenty of opportunities for input now. There's plenty of discussions for input after the focus groups have met and discussed their issues and recommended some policies. So lots of opportunities all the way through this process. Is there anyone else who'd like to ask a question? I think we're getting questions from the same folks over here.
Right here. I just wanted to say, woohoo! I'm so excited.
All right, thank you.
Perfect.
We've got one more question over here. Tom?
Are we on? Yep. I live in the county, and I'm just curious, 2 things. I thank you very much for all the input tonight, the enthusiasm that it brought us all. And as a member of the county, I'm just curious on what this does for us and where we stand, and are we going to have any input? And the other comment I might have was, I've been in Missoula since 1975. I've been through Vision Missoula. I've been through the UFTA process. I've seen a lot of these in the past, and the outcomes have not necessarily been outstanding. Tell me, please, that we're going to get somewhere with this one.
Well, to answer your first question, the county is embarking on their growth policy update, and we'll be kind of on a similar track with them. We will definitely be coordinating with them throughout the process, but the point is we are offering to take input from anyone. You're welcome to attend any of these meetings or any of these focus groups. We didn't check IDs at the door to make sure that we only had city residents in here. So, you know, we welcome everybody who has an interest in the community. I would certainly invite you to participate in that. And obviously, you also have the opportunity to participate through the county's process as well. So it's a great question, thank you. And, you know, the second statement, we have a great community. So I guess I haven't been here long enough to talk about what happened in the 70s and the 80s, but somehow we've got a great community out of this, and as Ed's been talking about, we have a great opportunity to build on that. More questions from different people, or can we go back? I'll hand it back to Bob. Thank you.